Hey, this is Malika of Evanston Live TV, and please welcome. Thank you all for attending the Mayoral Forum 2021. We are so excited. We've got some amazing candidates for this election, and we're overwhelmed. I've been saying in the other interviews and forums that Alderman Cicely Fleming had said, if you don't like the way things are running, then why don't you run? And by golly, so many people answered that call. We can't even get them all in. So it's so exciting. It is so exciting. So please, please, thank you so much for everyone wanting to engage and learn about the candidates. It means so much to us. Thank you. And I want to welcome all of our guests here today. First of all, I got to give a big thank you to my heaven sent Jernan Smith, who will be handling the timing and some of the questions. So he is, yes, he gave us a thumbs up there. Thank you so much, Jernan. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we have our candidates here. They are ready to roll. We have Senator Daniel Biss, we have Sebastian Nalls, and we have Lori Keenan. They are waiting to get going. They're waiting for you to just hear what their vision, what their platform is. And we have our panelists. We have come together to collaborate, and there's nothing like the community coming together. So we have my good friend, Willie Shaw, who's always got my back from the NAACP. Willie, where you at?
Right here, here I am.
Willie, she's always there for me. Absolutely love her. Thank you so much, Willie, for bringing us all together here today. We have Vanessa Calloway from the Delta Sigma Theta sorority. Yes, yes. And we have Claire McFarland from the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. Yes, yes. Okay, so this is how this is going to run for this forum, this mayoral forum. We're going to throw out the first 4 questions, myself, NAACP, the Delta Sigma Theta, and Alpha Kappa Alpha, and then we're going to open it up to the residents. So residents, get your questions ready. Use the raise your hand signal. If you can't find it, use the chat to type in your questions. Okay, and we are here till 9 o'clock. We are here till 9 o'clock. So this is your opportunity to talk to the candidates. Get your concerns out there, your issues, get your questions answered, okay? And I wanna give a big thank you to our sponsors today. That's 4 Sons Juice. Thank you so much for sponsoring, and to the Black Professionals Network. Thank you so much for sponsoring this event. So you're gonna be seeing their background on my virtual background. This is so interesting, the new way of doing things with Zoom, and it's so cool. It's absolutely cool. So we're gonna get started here, just one moment. All right. Okay, so our first question of the evening. I know many of you have been hearing that I asked the candidates to ask each other a question. Well, we're gonna do that again, but this time we're gonna change it up. We're gonna have each candidate pick the opponent they want to ask one question. Okay, so we're gonna start with Senator Daniel Biss. Please pick a candidate, your opponent, and ask them a question.
Well, thank you, Malika, and thank you, Evanston Live TV, NAACP, Alpha Kappa Alpha, Delta Sigma Theta. I am super excited about tonight, and so thank you very much for putting together this conversation. I'd like to ask Sebastian Nalls a question, if I could. You know, I think I'm not the only one in this community, I think, who's been inspired to see someone with your talent and youth step up and be in this race. And my question for you is, what thoughts do you have about ideas that we could use to engage more Evanstonians of your generation in the process of making policy for the city?
Thank you so much for that question. I really appreciate it. And I think it's important that we give a voice, especially to our younger generations that are growing up, just because that they are the future. Thank you to everyone who's put together this event. I'm happy to be here. But to answer the question, I believe it's involving youth, especially at the high school level, in our electoral process, and making sure that they're engaged politically, and especially on these local elections. We see that, quite frankly, local elections are one of the most, if not the most important elections that take place on a electoral basis. We see that the daily policies that are put in place by local government are what really affects individuals on a day-to-day basis, such as property taxes, various ordinances. So I think it's important that we teach our youth at the high school level about local government, how it's constructed, and how to participate. And I think it's also important that we provide internship opportunities for youth, especially coming out of high school and into college. I've said since the beginning of my campaign that I would love to establish an internship program in the mayor's office, enabling youth to come in, experience local government, and take those skills that they learn on the job anywhere in any walks of life.
All right, thank you so much, Sebastian. And Sebastian, pick an opponent to ask the question.
I would love to ask Lori Keenan a question. If you were to pick one issue, your most, the issue that really empowers you the most, what would you say is your prime focus, your main driving point in this election season?
I think my main point of being involved in the election is to give power back to the people of Evanston. I feel like for too long we've sort of lost our path, and so I'd really like to see community involvement not be a contentious thing, but an inclusive and inviting proposal. So I guess that is the point of running. And I've seen for too long that in my experience in the 22 years that I've been speaking truth to power here in Evanston, I've just seen more and more voices marginalized. And I think there's enough of that in the world that we don't need to be doing that in Evanston. So I'd really like to give the power back to the people and sort of level the playing field so that all voices are invited to the table. Because I think when we have more opinions and more voices, then we have a really truly diverse and stronger base. I think inviting more opinions, I think, always strengthens the outcome. So that, I guess that's my most important part of running.
Okay, and Lori, please pick an opponent and ask a question.
I guess I would like to ask Mr. Biss what he has personally been involved in town that he has found the most rewarding, and why.
Well, my service that I've most been proud of is my legislative service. I've spent 8 years representing this community, working on priorities that were important to this community, and working with the city government to actually deliver on things that we needed. So that included things like working closely with then Mayor Tisdall to make sure that we, at the state level, did what we could to allow the Evanston Fire Department to diversify. It meant working with the city to make sure we passed legislation on the state level to enable small businesses here in town to grow, to enable the streamlining and efficient delivery of services in our government. And I felt that in the course of that time, I learned a great deal about what it takes to make city government, state government work together effectively on behalf of the people. And that has a lot to do with what brought me into this race in this moment, because we have a lot of challenges in front of us. And just like no one person is going to enable us to address those challenges alone, no one organization or institution. We need all of our organizations in town, the city government, District 65 and 202, together with Oakton, the various nonprofits and civic organizations whose engagement make up the fabric of this community, to work together with state and federal government to deliver, first of all, on the policies we need to get us out of this terrible pandemic and the social and economic consequences of it, but also to deliver on the bold agendas that we all believe in, to make 2021 a time of actual transformative fights for racial justice and housing affordability and climate justice. And so I think I think that time taught me a lot about how we can all come together and move an agenda forward. I'm certainly proud of that work, but most importantly, I'm excited about what the lessons I learned in the course of that work will enable me to bring to the mayor's office so we can get a lot done together.
Okay, thank you very much, candidates. Thank you, Senator Biss. So I am going to turn it over to Willie Shaw of the NAACP to ask a question. Willie, we can't hear you. Unmute.
Yeah, there it goes. Sorry.
What's that?
Hello, panelists and participants. Welcome again. I'm Willie Shaw, and I am the Civic Engagement Chair for the Evanston North Shore branch of the NAACP. First, I'd like to recognize all of the work that has been done during these last several months. Under our national leadership, our president is Derek Johnson, and of course, our local president, Reverend Dr. Michael Neighbors, our committees at the local NAACP branch, and especially to you, our membership. The NAACP is approaching its 112th anniversary on February 12th. And our mission has remained the same all of those years. That mission is to ensure the political, the educational, the social, economic equality of all people, and to eliminate race-based discrimination. We try to accomplish these through what we call our game changers. And those game changers are economic sustainability, education, health, public safety, criminal justice, voting rights, political representation, and expanding youth and adult engagement. So, panelists, with these changes in mind, our first question is to each of you. If you were elected mayor and you received a $1 million grant or more to use for the city in any way you wish, how would you use it and why? Or is there a different area of focus that you would choose? And can you prioritize that focus for us?
Who would you like to address that to first?
Each one of the candidates, Biss.
Well, thank you, Ms. Shaw, and thank you to the NAACP Evanston North Shore branch and my friend, Dr. Neighbors. And again, I just appreciate this forum very much. Well, what a wonderful question. What a wonderful problem to be handed. If I should be so lucky as to become mayor, I sure hope that $1 million drops on the city immediately. And we may not be that fortunate, but I sure hope that we are. You know, obviously right now we're in a pandemic. We've got a budget problem and we've got small businesses that are experiencing challenges. And we have a lot of people who are just trying to make rent and pay their utility bills and put food on the table. And so right now, if that money came in, I think it absolutely would need to be put toward those emergency causes. There's no question about it. There's too many people suffering, too many people struggling to put money anywhere else. But I'll say that if that $1 million were to come in a different time, in an era where we didn't have the kind of pain and struggling that people are undergoing right now, what I would say is I would love to use it to make sure we're doing long-term planning on the hard issues. So for example, I think there's an incredible opportunity right now to fundamentally re-envision the way we do public safety in Evanston, to rethink what are the places that we need to focus our traditional policing on, and what are all the other activities that really police aren't the best trained people to deal with, but that we right now are trying to solve with police: mental health crisis, substance abuse, and so forth. We've got to make a fundamental transformation in how we do that work. And guess what? If we do it right, at the end of the day, we'll be providing better services at a lower cost. But, and this is where the $1 million comes in, it's going to not be free to make that transition. It's not going to be free to do that planning, to build up those other services, to shift the way we do things. And so there's a lot of bold ideas that I think will require real meticulous planning, and planning costs money. And I sure wouldn't mind having $1 million to help with that.
Okay.
Lori?
Well, I guess, again, back to, if the city right now were to get $1 million, and sometimes we get that from Northwestern University, I think it's such an exceptional time right now because of a pandemic. And I think that that is a public health crisis. But I think Evanston is also faced with other public health crises. And for instance, poverty is a health crisis, public health crisis. Racism is a public health crisis. Violence is a public health crisis. So I think that I would initially want to explore going into those avenues and finding the ways that we could help to supplement programs that would support the people who are most affected by that. So that would be one place. Another place that I would really like to support is youth services. And again, this goes back to, I was involved in a local organization. I was a founding member of the DJ Coleman Foundation when one of our youth was shot and killed in town. And his mother formed an organization to help uplift the youth. I spoke to a gentleman today who's part of a youth training, youth job services program in Evanston. And I think that the experiences that our kids have in town is truly, they are formative experiences. And while my oldest son he became a helicopter pilot for the US Coast Guard, one of his best friends from Kingsley went to prison. And I think that has a lot to do with how we treat our youth and how inequitable our system is in Evanston. So I think between those two things that I would really try to fund youth services in a way that is truly equitable in our community.
Thank you, Sebastian.
Yes, it's an interesting question, to say the least. $1 million is a good deal of money to have on the table to produce any number of policies. But in terms of COVID-19 times, I would say that the most effective way to use that $1 million would be to set up a small business grant fund. I believe that if you take $1 million, you divide it by $25,000 for a startup cost for a small business, you would come to around 40 businesses that could be possibly funded with this $1 million. And I think that it can include businesses that come from Evanston residents of all different races, different ethnicities, different backgrounds. And that would definitely speed up our recovery process in an economic sense, since we saw a mass exodus of small businesses, especially in our downtown area as a result of COVID-19. So I think bringing back Black businesses as well as other small businesses to Evanston would be extremely beneficial for us moving forward. And would establish the more hometown feel of Evanston going forward. But looking beyond COVID-19, I think it would be also beneficial to set up a number of youth programs, especially early childcare programs, and increase accessibility for low and middle income families. We see that multiple studies have shown that access to early childcare programs have increased the likelihood of individuals later on in life attending college and not committing a crime. So that in and of itself can deter crime here in Evanston. And creating programs for high school youth. We see that there's an education gap between Black students and white students of about 1.0. And creating programs for them so that they can creatively channel their energy and refocus into a new way that could possibly close that gap and provide new economic opportunities for them as well.
Thank you, Sebastian.
Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you, Willie. That was a great question. Thank you, thank you. Now I'm going to turn it over to Stella Hickman. She is the Alpha Kappa Alpha Delta Chi Omega chapter president. That's a lot to say for a person's title, but please welcome Stella Hickman.
Good evening, candidates, panelists, guests, and co-sponsor, as Malika had mentioned. I'm Stella Salisa Hickman, the president of Delta Chi Omega Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, who, by the way, will be turning 113 years tomorrow. Together with the local chapter, Delta Chi Omega, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated was found on a mission comprised of 5 basic tenets. that have remained unchanged since the sorority's inception more than a century ago. Alpha Kappa Alpha's mission is to cultivate and encourage high scholastic and ethical standards, to promote unity and friendship among college women, to study and help alleviate problems concerning girls and women in order to improve their social stature, to maintain a progressive interest in college life, and to be of service to mankind. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce my fellow soror sister and chapter member, Claire McFarland, who is a seasoned attorney with over 25 years of experience practicing law. Attorney McFarland began her legal career at Jenner & Block, a prominent international firm headquartered in Chicago, before branching out to establish her own small firm. She also is the founder of Elder Law and Wellness Initiative, a nonprofit organization that provides free legal and social service consultations to qualifying seniors throughout Cook County. Ms. McFarland also is a frequent speaker on estate planning and elder law issues. She has served as co-chairperson for the Elder Law Committee of the Women's Bar Association of Illinois and is also a member of Chicago Bar Association, Illinois State Bar Association, and the Cook County Bar Association. Ms. McFarland holds a BA in Business Economics from Brown University and MA from the University of London School of Oriental and African Studies and a JD from Northwestern University. Please join me in welcoming my fellow soror, Claire McFarland.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hickman, my soror there. This is a really very flattering introduction. Thank you. And I want to thank, our chapter wants to thank everyone for the opportunity to participate in this forum. So for our question, and there were so many issues that are pressing now, but one of the key questions that we wanted to bring before the panel was, what will each candidate do to promote improved relations and understanding between law enforcement and the Black and Brown communities, including issues like community policing and the interactions between the police and youth groups, utilizing such organized groups as FAM and other Evanston-based organizations that could foster trust and understanding between these two parts of our community.
Okay, and who would you like that question to go to first?
I'll direct that first to Sebastian.
Thank you. So I believe that the first step to mending community relations is reforming our police department and reallocating some of those funds. The reality is that the Evanston Police Department is not exempt from the national issues that are currently facing policing here in the United States. 4 years ago, during my junior year of high school, I was at the McDonald's on Dempster and Dodge. We were ordering our food, and a number of kids that were also in there were messing around. They threatened to call the police, and they actually called the police on them. Those kids left, and those police officers, once they arrived, turned their attention onto me. And I was forcibly removed from the McDonald's and threatened to be charged with trespassing. And my mother later called the police department a number of times and was ignored countless. So I believe that in order to facilitate growth between our community, and especially our Black and Brown community and the police department, we need to first start with a comprehensive review of all of our officers, going through and evaluating individuals and making sure that they don't hold biases against people of Black and Brown skin. Next would be going through and reallocating funds and diverting them to the Evanston Parks and Recreation Department, the Health and Human Services Department, as well as the Community Development Department, to create programs that benefit youth, to lower youth criminality, as well as benefit marginalized communities. And the next step would be the creation of an alternate emergency system, similar to one in Eugene, Oregon called the Kahoot system, providing a crisis worker and as well as an EMT that can respond to certain calls. It's important to note that that Eugene, Oregon also saw a decrease in some of their crime as a result and saved money in the process. So I think all of these are meaningful steps to heal that divide that we've seen in Evanston and across the nation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Senator Biss?
Yeah, thank you. There's a lot to say on this, so I'm gonna try to give kind of a cliff notes and cram as much in as I can in 2 minutes. First of all, I think when it comes to trust between the community and the police department, we need to have much stronger civilian oversight. We need to have real civilian oversight board with teeth, with the ability to discipline officers, to start investigations, to subpoena. Because right now, there is, of course, a civilian oversight board, but it doesn't really feel like they have a lot of authority. And so there's not that tool that allows the community to really say, listen, we're the ones in charge here, the police work for us, and we have the power to change their conduct if we don't like what we see. The next thing, and I think this is really, really important, is about the way we release and analyze and talk about data. There's actually a good state law on the books that I was involved in supporting back when it passed, which requires police departments to collect and release data about traffic stops sorted by race. So we can understand how much bias is there, where is that occurring, what can we do to address it? But that's not the only data that we collect. There's data about use of force, and there's data about where the officers are at what time and who they come in contact with and so forth. And right now, if you want to get your hands on that data, you got to yank it out of the department with the Freedom of Information Act request and often a lot of battling. What we ought to do instead is proactively as a city release the information and use that release as an opportunity to have a community-wide discussion. So we can sit down together and say, are we moving in the right direction or the wrong direction? If we're moving in the right direction, how? And how do we accelerate that progress? If we're moving in the wrong direction, what are we going to change immediately? We shouldn't be hiding from the truth. We should be releasing the truth and then using it to adjust our behavior. And then finally, we need to do a full census of what all the police is doing and say among the police's current activities, which are things that ought to be done by somebody else. Things like mental health treatment and substance abuse crises and traffic stops and so forth would be better done by someone else. And if we move those responsibilities over, we won't have this source of friction between the community and police that we do right now.
Thank you, Senator Biss. Lori Keenan?
I guess where I would start is with a forensic audit of the Evanston Police Department for not just the past couple of years, but all the way back, and look at the budget. I know that, for instance, the SROs at the high school cost our city $500,000 a year. Now, I would love to see $500,000 a year go into job training programs for kids at the high school versus security and having a police presence there. Today, actually, Carolyn Murray, who's running in the 5th Ward, announced Jacob Blake, the father of Jacob Blake Jr., who was shot recently, is putting forward, he was in Washington, D.C., and he's putting forward a bill that would hold police officers personally responsible. It would help to cut down, it would ban the no-knock warrants, and it would help to keep the flow of information. Again, we went, Evanston regressively took FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, out of the city clerk's hand and put it in the hands of the Evanston Police Department, which is, I think, wrong. I think that the public should be able to get information when they ask for it. So those are some of the places that when I would start. I think that when communities like Somerville, Massachusetts, which is an analog community to Evanston, can police themselves for tens of millions of dollars less than Evanston can when they have a similar demographic and they're a college town, I think that we should be really looking at the bottom line and what our police are doing, and provide them the funding that they need to do the job that they need, but take the jobs away from them and put them into social services so that we're not over policing our Black and brown community.
Okay. Thank you very much, Lori. Our next question will come from Delta Sigma Theta. Where's she at there?
Hello.
Yeah,
Good evening.
yes,
Oh,
Vanessa,
she's back. Thank you. Go ahead.
Vanessa, ask a question of our candidates.
All right. Greetings to the Evanston community from the Evanston North Shore Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority. And as you may not know, we celebrated our 108th years of existence yesterday, January 13th. So 108 years of civic engagement based on scholarship, service, and sisterhood. And here is the question I have for all of the candidates. The question number one is, excuse me, what is your plan for equity in the city? Would it include actionable and measurable input from the citizens of Evanston?
Okay, and Vanessa, who would you like to direct that to first?
I'd like to direct it first to Ms. Keenan, if I'm correct.
So my plan for equity in the city, and again, I am learning every day. And this week in particular, one of our candidates was Zoom bombed in a call that she was hosting with the DPOE, the Democratic Party of Evanston. And it's an eye-opening experience, I think, when it happens to a friend of yours. And so I think that in terms of equity, we need to be incorporating education programs for everyone in Evanston, because as I'm learning, I'm sort of somewhere on the spectrum of learning what is anti-racism and why should everybody be participating in this sort of an educational program. So that would be one thing. And how to make it measurable, I'm not sure about the answer of that, but I think that if we can at least start to implement a program and use our voices to help our community as a whole, I think that that's going to be a sort of a longer term solution. I think I'd like us all to keep our ears open and look at our community as a whole instead of looking at our community as one part of town and another part of town. It's what I've been involved in the 22 years that I've been involved in organizations and efforts in town. It's what I've tried to do, and it's the place that I've really found most rewarding for me personally. So I would encourage programs like that could be sort of a broader based program across the city.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
And
Mr. Nalls?
So after talking to some residents, especially in the Fifth Ward, walking into local businesses and having those meaningful conversations, I think it's important that we take the work that's been started in our reparations program and run with it, quite frankly. We see that some residents have been frustrated as they feel that the qualifications that they have to meet are very narrow, and it often excludes individuals who are not homeowners. We see that seniors that are in senior living can't really do anything with $25,000 worth of homeowners assistance. So expanding that program to provide entrepreneurship grants for individuals, as well as those homeowner grants, rental assistance, as well as possibly even direct stimulus. I think that we need to have more engagement with individuals who actually apply for these and qualify for these reparations and see what they need. It would be wrong for the city of Evanston to try to determine what these individuals need. If the city of Evanston has been putting forth racist policies in the past, then they are in no position to telling individuals what they can do with their money. So I think that we need to have those conversations further, talk to those community members, give them a platform and engage in meaningful conversations so we can move forward and have a more equitable future overall here in Evanston.
okay, thank you, Sebastian. And Senator Biss?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's so critical. You know, right now it's very fashionable to say, and I think a lot of folks at the city will say, hey, we assess every decision through an equity lens. That's kind of the phrase you hear a lot. And so let's ask ourselves, are we actually doing that? And I would respectfully suggest certainly not enough. And so what I would say we ought to do is start a true meticulous process to have a city-wide conversation, bring all stakeholders and all communities to the table, and develop a real definition of what we mean by equity. And by the way, in my opinion, that definition should be broad. It's about residential segregation. It's about wealth inequity. It's about health inequity. It's about opportunity, economic opportunity. It's about transportation inequity. It's about environmental justice. We need to write down clearly a comprehensive definition of all the different components that go into the inequity that is daily life for Black and Brown Evanstonians today. And then we need to, and I think we might have to use outside help to get this done, put in place a clear process by which every decision made at the city government, in fact, is tested against those definitions of equity. The question is, hey, we're considering passing an ordinance. We're considering hiring a person. We're considering promoting a person. We're considering starting a new program. We're considering buying a piece of equipment. Whatever we're about to do, ask ourselves, is it advancing that definition of equity or not? And if not, you just don't do it. You just don't do it. And that means that the way that we do hiring and contracting will be different. It means that every policy we're going to pass will be analyzed through this lens. I think to make that work properly, there's got to be someone on staff, probably at least a half of a full-time person, who's devoted solely to implementing our equity vision. And there has to be a person in each city department who's also responsible for making sure the internal decisions there are consistent with our equity vision. And finally, in my last 5 seconds, the mayor makes a lot of appointments. Those appointments must also be consistent with our equity vision. And that's not only diversity of skin color, it's diversity of experience, because not every Black person's lived the same life. We can't have the same small number of Black people purport to speak for the whole Black community.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you very much, Senator Biss. Now we're going to open it up to the residents. And I'm pretty sure majority of the people on right now know who our candidates are, but let's just have them give a 60-second introduction or something they just want to say to the residents before we open up the gates to the residents. So let's start with Sebastian Nalls. You have 60 seconds.
Yes, for those who may not know, my name is Sebastian Nalls. I'm a 20-year resident here in Evanston, and I currently attend Purdue University, majoring both in accounting and political science. And I'm here because I believe that Evanston needs to transform its government, and that we have issues on the table that we've talked about so far and will continue to talk about with each and every one of your questions that we need to address. And we can address those issues and work with individuals like you all here today in creating a better, more equitable and brighter future for Evanston overall. So I thank you all for coming, and I thank you all for giving us questions for the rest of this forum.
Okay. Thank you, Sebastian. And Lori Keenan.
Thank you, Malika, and congratulations to you too today about your Community Leadership Award. I don't think there's anyone more deserving, so congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah. So my name is Lori Keenan, and I am a 22-year resident of Evanston. I've been involved in a number of local issues in town, among them saving the branch libraries, trying to build a branch library on the west side of Evanston. I was involved as a founding member, as I mentioned, in the DJ Coleman Foundation, which was to uplift our youth. It was formed after a friend of my daughter's, Kingsley and Haven classmate, was killed 2 weeks into his freshman year at Evanston. And we provided scholarship opportunities to minority youth. And then recently in the Harley Clark referendum, which sounded as if it might be sort of a bastion of white privilege, but the goal of that referendum, which got 80% of the vote in every ward and nearly every precinct in town, was really to open that building up and to invite a part of the community to use the building at a time or at a place that hadn't historically been very inviting. So those are some of the things I've been involved in town. I feel like it's really important for the community members to have a voice. It's what I've always spoken up and spoken out for. And I hope to be your mayor and be able to put the power back in the hands of the people.
Okay. Thank you, Lori. And Senator Biss.
Thank you so much. My name is Daniel Biss. I live on Central Street with my wife, Karen, our 2 kids who are in 5th grade at Willard and 7th grade at Haven. Although actually right now they're in the 5th and 7th grade in our house, like everybody else in District 65. And as I mentioned earlier, I spent 8 of the last 10 years as a state legislator representing this community, fighting for values of responsible budgeting, economic and social justice, environmental sustainability, political reform in the state capitol. And I'm proud of that record, but more important than that, I think I've learned a lot about what it takes to actually make something move in government to get things done on behalf of ordinary people. Just want to close my introduction by saying, again, how excited I am about this evening. You know, I think that we govern well when we govern together. And the best thing about a campaign is it's a chance for us to come together and have a real conversation about how we can solve problems together. That's harder in a pandemic, but it's still possible. And I'm so appreciative of the 100 people on this Zoom session who are willing to be a part of talking and thinking about what we can do to make our community better.
Okay, thank you, Senator Biss. Okay, our first question, our first resident will be Meg Welch. So Meg, please unmute yourself. You can turn, you have the option of turning on your camera or keeping it off. It's up to you. I understand.
Yes, I'm gonna choose to keep that camera off. My question is for Daniel Biss. And I've heard you remark at previous forums about how the winds have changed recently. I assume you were referring to the Georgia win and now the Democratic majority in the House and the Senate, and that there is potential for funding to come to cities and small businesses, and that you also, in that context, made reference to your relationship with our Congresswoman and other references to different layers of government. And I'm wondering, what is the reason or evidence to think that Evanston would be ignored with federal funding unless you are the mayor?
Well, I appreciate that question, Meg, and I sounds like I've got to clarify my comments. So first of all, I'm not suggesting either that the other two candidates wouldn't make an effort to pursue federal help. And I certainly, the last thing I would suggest is that our congressional delegation, whether that's Congresswoman Schakowsky or Senators Durbin or Duckworth, would ignore Evanston if I were not the mayor. That's not true. And if that's the impression I gave, then I'm glad to have the chance to correct the record. However, I do think that partnership between different layers of government is difficult. It requires nimbleness. It requires knowing each other and knowing the system. I will tell you that when I was in the legislature, Elizabeth Tisdall was a close friend, and we worked really well together, and the city of Evanston benefited. And there were other mayors of the other communities in my district who I didn't have a problem with them. We had a nice relationship, but we weren't as effective partners. And therefore we weren't able to collectively deliver as effectively for our community. And so I think, it would be, we could imagine a situation where government is just kind of a completely blind machine and moves forward irrespective of personalities and relationships. But I think realistically, being able to work really effectively and seamlessly with the federal government will be a plus. And I do think that I bring experience doing that, partnerships with those individuals. I'm excited to have the support of Congresswoman Schakowsky in this race, not only because I think it's useful to have an Evanston icon endorse you in a campaign, but more importantly, because I think it sets the tone for a partnership that we're going to have that's going to be good for the community. I know that if Sebastian or Lori wins, they will do their best, and Jan will do her best, and the city will move forward and be in as good a shape as possible. But I also know that starting my term as mayor with those relationships already established and a track record of working effectively together on behalf of the people of Evanston will be useful. And I'm excited about what we can pull off together, because we need a lot of help right now.
Thank you, Senator Biss. Our next resident is Tracy Fultz.
Hi, everyone. This question is for all of the candidates. What would be the criticism that residents might offer about you and your candidacy? And what would you say to change their minds?
Okay, Laura Keenan, would you like to take that one first?
Sure. I know what the criticisms are. I've heard them. I am not a politician. I am one of you, and I have been in the weeds in Evanston for a long time. And along the way, I have ruffled feathers, but I've also mended fences. And some of the people who I began on opposite views of things, we've come to not only build consensus, but build really good things in town. So I would say right now, the criticism about me is that it's been a NIMBY, or I've only been involved in the things that affect my community. And I would say that that isn't the case, that I have been involved across Evanston. I have spoken up for employees who have been discriminated against. I have spoken up for economic or environmental racism. I have spoken up for leaf blowers in the environment. So I think that across the board, whether it's the economy and budgets and policing and whatever else, I've been at more city council meetings than either of my opponents. And I think that that matters. I think showing up is a really important part of Evanston, and having the relationships with other legislators, I think ultimately will be an effective tool. But I think knowing the Evanston community and having worked in the trenches with them over the years is going to be a more important factor.
Okay, thank you, Lori. Senator Biss?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, this is the second forum we've had in this campaign, the second, I think, of many. And so the first forum that we had last week, both other candidates criticized me for my endorsements. They said, you know, first of all, we agree that we really need to make bold, dramatic changes at city government on issues like policing and housing and climate and equity and more. And they said, you know, hey, Daniel, how are you going to be able to make change if you're endorsed by a lot of the people who are already in office? And what I would say is that we are living in a time right now in Evanston where there's a lot of tension. People are mad at each other. There's a lot of rifts and a lot of divisions in our community. And I see that as a foremost problem. Healing those divides, bringing us all together so we can move forward and do bold things. That's going to be, I think, the primary challenge of the next mayor, whatever he or she wants to accomplish, because accomplishing anything is going to be difficult when people are divided. And I am really proud that I am bringing to this campaign people on all sides of all of those divides. You know, yes, I have a lot of folks on council who are supporting me. Some people might love city council and love that. Some people might not love city council and not love that. But guess what? When the city council themselves is divided, folks on both sides of those divides are supporting this campaign. And I think that indicates that I'm going to be able to bring council together to bridge some of those divides and move the city forward. Often when people who are supporting me call me up, they say, hey, I've looked at your supporter list online at danielbiss.com. And wow, it's impressive. There's a lot of people I like there, but there's some people I don't like there too. And I always say, that's good. That's good. I'm not going to apologize for the fact that someone's supporting me who disagrees with someone else who's supporting me, because I think what my campaign presents the city with is the opportunity, if we work hard and treat each other with respect and listen openly and work together, to actually unite this town so we can move forward and do bold things.
Thank you, Senator Biss. Yeah, it's going to take a lot to unite, because there's definitely been a divide between council and residents. That's a lot of tension. Sebastian Nalls?
I would say that the most glaring criticism is probably my age, which is pretty evident. I'm 20 years old, and some people think that that means that I lack experience. I've worked in the city of Evanston for a number of years, and for the last 2 years, I've worked in a management and administrative role, having over 30 employees and volunteers under me and hundreds of kids in the programs that I run. So I've been in that role before. And I also believe that my age brings new ideas to the table and a new way of thinking that might not have existed before. And it's frankly, it's my turn for my generation to step up and take the mantle of responsibility and move this city and this nation forward, bringing in new leaders that have a new vision of progressiveness and have values that may not have been shown before. And to remark what Senator Biss brought up about previous forums, and where we see council members have pushed regressive policies and have at times harmed some of the members of our community with some of the policies that they've implemented. And I can say for a fact that I will not sacrifice any of my ideals for compromise. Now, I may sit at the table and work together to create meaningful legislation and meaningful policy, but that does not mean that I'm going to be throwing people under the bus to sacrifice any of our residents for the betterment of compromise. And we've seen that that's happened time and time again, especially with our marginalized communities here in Evanston. So I think it's important that, yes, we need to compromise, but at the same time, we need to establish that we have ideals of what progressiveness is, and we need to run with it. We need to work on the problems that we face here in Evanston and bring Evanston to a brighter future.
Malika, there's a question here from one of our seniors that I'd like to get in.
Okay, we have Larry Garfield. He's waiting to ask a question, and then we'll get to the senior question.
All right.
Okay, thank you so much, Sebastian, for that. Thank you. And Larry Garfield.
Hello. I'm going to leave my camera off here. I haven't shaved today.
Okay.
So in my time that I've been paying attention to city government, one thing I hear a lot is we need to be careful with the budget. We need to not spend money we don't have, need to not take on new expenses, which is fair enough. But we have 3 candidates in this race. There's a number of other races that have multiple, more than 2 candidates, which means we're very likely going to need to go to a runoff election in April rather than just being done in February. That doubles the cost of running elections. We could easily save that money by adopting ranked choice voting for the city, for city elections, like a number of cities around the country have done. New York is the largest one recently. 5 additional cities adopted it in the last election. Would you support ranked choice voting for Evanston elections as a way to reduce costs and have various other benefits associated with that? This is to all candidates.
Okay, who would you like to direct that to first, Larry?
Let's start with Daniel.
Thank you, Larry. I strongly support ranked choice voting. I actually had legislation in Springfield to get it done. It's not something that the kind of machine politicians in Springfield liked, so I couldn't get it through, but it's something I believe in. And just to bring everyone up to speed, the idea of ranked choice voting is instead of, the voting systems we're used to are either a system like what we have now, where you have an initial race and then you got to go back and vote again a few weeks later in a runoff, which is, as Larry says, is pretty expensive, or a system where even if there's 8 different candidates, whoever gets the most votes wins, and they might win with 20% or something, and you wind up thinking, wait, is that person really supported by the community at large? So a system of ranked choice voting is where when you go into the voting booth, you don't just check, here's the candidate who I'm for. You say, hey, my first choice is this person, and my second choice is this other person, and my third choice is this other person. And then when the votes are tabulated, they run it through a system where they ensure that whoever winds up winning actually has majority support. It's a system that's in place now in Maine, for example. It's in place in other places in the country. And what it does is it allows us to have an efficient, quick election that actually measures the will of the people. I'll quickly end because I think the history note here is pretty important. The system that has an initial round and then a runoff round 6 weeks later was initially designed specifically by white supremacists who did not want to see Chicago elect an African-American mayor. Now, didn't work for them. We elected Harold Washington anyhow in 1983, but nonetheless, the voting system that we have now was created, I think, for pretty malevolent reasons, and it's got a lot of problems associated with it. So I would say, Larry, the solution you suggest of ranked choice voting, where we go in on one day, it's less expensive, we rank our options, and then we find out who the preference of the community is and we move forward, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Biss. Sebastian Nalls?
I think Senator Biss did a great job of explaining ranked choice voting, so I won't spend too much time on it. But yes, I do support it. I've always supported it through my 2 years of being an eligible voter. It's something that enhances democracy. We've seen it in effect in Georgia, especially with their Senate races and their subsequent runoff races that just took place. And we saw that lower turnout was in effect because of those runoff races. And as Senator Biss mentioned, that's because white supremacists originally drew up this idea to limit the amount of Black people and especially low income people from voting. And, it's hard enough already to come out on one day and vote. And it's making it more difficult if you have to tell that same person, hey, take off work again, come out, vote another day 6 weeks later. And for some individuals, that's not possible. So I believe that it's necessary that we implement something like that in Evanston, in Illinois at large, and in the nation, and just to expand democracy. I don't see a problem with giving more individuals options and expanding our electorate as a subsequent.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. And Lori Keenan?
Well, yes is the short answer. I think we could and should be using ranked choice voting. And I think that right now, especially in the country right now, I think that all eyes were on elections. And we all learned what we could do for a mail-in vote. And we all learned more about early voting. And I think even standing at the polls on election day, there were barely any people there. Now, part of that is about COVID. But if part of that is about voter suppression, then I think if we're asking people to come out and we can get them out one time, then I think that's going to be the most efficient and inclusive way to have an election. And I think that that's an important part. Here in town, I can say, I don't honestly, if I'm telling the truth, know that I've ever voted in a mayoral primary. Now this year, it's more important than ever to me. So I think that education and inclusion and trying to get a system in place that helps everybody is going to be the best choice for everyone.
Okay. Thank you, Lori. These are some great questions, everyone. I mean, these are awesome. Okay, Willie Shaw, you have a senior that has a question?
Yes, I have a question from Marcia, who's very concerned and actually frightened. She said that she would like to know about the senior building that is in the 1900 senior building when it needed help to stop building a 16-story building in their parking lot. They needed help and they heard nothing from any of you. I think that there are big developers out there and that you're willing to sell out Evanston with no regards for the seniors, the Black and brown community that live here. I think you have learned key buzzwords with no real meaning or feelings about us. I feel sorry for us in Evanston. From one of the senior citizens, Marcia, from the 1900 building in Evanston.
Okay. Lori Keenan, would you like to take that one?
Absolutely. So this is regarding the Emerson building, and I was extremely involved in that actually, and working with a couple of the community members who were opposing that building, and they were in close contact with the people in this building. What happened with that building was they built it twice the height that zoning allowed, and they did it by coming in and doing what the developer himself called zoning gymnastics. So what they did basically was come in and say this was going to be 70% affordable housing, when in the end, it became 30% affordable housing. Now the average median income for Black and brown families in town is something like $44,000. And the average median income for white families is $77,000. So what happened with that building, the city council passed it like they've passed 6 buildings like this in their past 4 years. I think that until we have a true affordable housing policy that works for everyone, then nothing works for anyone in town. And it's why I've stood up to this kind of aggressive developer, giveaway to luxury developers. And it's why I've been vocal and outspoken about it. I spoke at the council meetings and at the planning and development meetings about this building, and I opposed it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Lori. Senator Biss?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think affordability has got to be right near the top of our priorities in this community. One thing that as I was following this particular controversy, one thing that I took great note of is that you have people from, for instance, Community Partners for Affordable Housing and Connections for the Homeless advocating in support of this building because the need for affordable units, particularly the need for affordable units for households living in deep poverty, is so dramatic. But I would just say, like, let's back up and ask ourselves, what is it going to take to solve the affordability crisis in Evanston? Because I think it's fair to say that we have an affordability crisis for middle income households and for households living in deep poverty. So we've got to do a few things. First of all, we need to take a run at, again, changing and improving our inclusionary housing ordinance. Our inclusionary housing ordinance right now isn't generating enough units for households living in deep poverty. And by the way, when developers choose not to develop the units they're supposed to under the ordinance and simply put money in a fund, well, first of all, they're not putting enough money in that fund. And so the city doesn't have enough resources to actually develop the units that we need. And second of all, we don't have a strong enough, clear enough plan for what we're going to do with that money. So our inclusionary housing ordinance needs to be stronger. And I think the person asking the question is hitting on something important, which is that developers do have an awful lot of power in this city, and we need to have a mayor who's able to do two things. Number one, stand up to them, and number two, bring the council along. Because we cannot have more affordable housing without more units. We also can't have more affordable housing if we just allow ourselves to follow the developers around and do what they want. So we need someone who's able to sit down with the developers, push back, say no, hold their feet to the fire, and bring the council along to actually enact those policies. If we do that with the required ordinance change for the affordable housing ordinance, I think we can tackle this problem.
Okay, thank you, Senator Biss. Sebastian Nalls?
This is an excellent topic. Originally, when I heard about this going on, I was still at school, and I actually drove back from Purdue University to talk to some of the residents at 1900 Sherman and have those meaningful conversations about what they were facing, what they felt was unjust, and frankly, malpractice of the city council. And to my recollection, I only remember Ms. Keenan talking at city council meetings in public comment and bringing this to the attention of the city council, that there were residents that were being mistreated in this whole process. And I think this ties into the greater issue of government transparency and accountability, that we need to have these meaningful conversations with residents on a consistent basis so they don't feel as if we aren't talking to them. That's probably been one of the major complaints that I've seen since being on the campaign trail, is that they feel as if they don't have a representative talking to them. And that goes across the city to all the wards that I've been at. And I made a pledge at the beginning of my campaign to hold weekly town hall meetings that residents can come voice their opinions or just come to chat with an elected representative to get a good understanding about what's going on in Evanston and what I can possibly do to help. I've always said that the role of mayor is up to the individual who ultimately takes that office. And I see the role of mayor as being an advocate for the community. And I promise to be an advocate for the community day in and day out, to listen to all of the concerns of community members and take those concerns that I hear and bring them to city council and address them to city staff and say, hey, you know, this is an issue that's really impacting this age group or in this ward. We need to fix it, come together and come to a solution. Because I think that's what meaningful policy is. And that's what elected representatives are supposed to do. We're public servants day in and day out. And we're not fulfilling that meaning if we're not doing our jobs correctly.
Thank you for that. That is a very huge complaint in the city from the residents, is that there's all these development deals and the residents are made to feel like they're having some say in it, but it's clear the decision has already been made. I have a follow-up question to that, because I hear about that. That's a huge complaint with the residents. With the council that we have, there seems to be like an alliance with a few of them. I won't say all of them, with a few of them. And their votes just seem to win out. So how will you come in and fight that system if they remain on the council? How do you fight that system that's in place when they've got this bond, this clear bond with each other?
I would say that it's important then that we have those conversations again with constituents and bring that to the attention of these aldermen and say, hey, these are issues that impact Evanston residents and we need to act on it. If we continue to fail to perform our duties as elected representatives, then we do not deserve to be in office. And that includes working with residents to expand their voice in city council, pushing for, instead of just public comment, make it a discussion. And if a resident has a question for a certain alderman or city staff in particular, that they can ask that question and actually get a response, or set up a time where they can talk one-on-one with that individual so that there's some sort of accountability. I've seen time and time again from speaking in public comment myself that I'll say something or a resident will say something and an elected official will just stare blankly into their cameras and just move on to the next person instead of actually addressing the issues at hand. So this relates to what I said earlier about standing your ground on your values and pushing through any opposition. That yes, I'm willing to work together and we can provide a meaningful solution, but we cannot ignore the people of Evanston because we are public servants and our job is to serve the public at hand.
Anyone else like to address that? How do you fight a system that's in place? And it's strong.
Yeah. Do you mind if I jump in, Malika?
Sure. Yes.
I think if you look at Evanston history, what you find is that much more often than not, the council is in agreement with the mayor on big issues. In other words, the council kind of evolves and changes shape depending on the priorities of the mayor. I think that's why it's so important that we're having this campaign, that we have 3 candidates who are out there saying what we believe in, talking about our vision, and then we're going to have an election, and one of us is going to win, and that's going to send a signal to the council. Hey, here's a value system that the people of Evanston got behind. So first of all, that's one basic thing. I think the mayor, if they are willing to work meticulously and carefully, they have, by definition, the mandate of the whole city behind them, and they can use that to move council along. The second thing is, I think, your question was asked very, very delicately. I'm going to be a little bit less diplomatic.
I have to live here.
Well, me too. I'm trying to get votes here and everything, but I'm just, whatever. I'm going to be a bull in a china shop about this. Our council, they're at each other's throats all the time. They're fighting with each other. They're calling each other names. There's all kinds of tension up there on that dais. Now, obviously, that's, not how we'd like it to be, but it also means that there's an opportunity for some change, right? It's not 9-0 votes. It's not all of them marching in lockstep. It's a lot of discussion and back and forth and tension. And so the next mayor is going to take office and have a council. It may have a lot of overlap with the current council. It may have much less overlap. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But they're going to have a council that's still trying to figure out who it is and what it is. And so I think we need a mayor who comes in with a mandate to enact a bold agenda. A mayor who said, here's what I'm going to do on public safety. Here's what I'm going to do on housing. Here's what I'm going to do on equity. Here's what I'm going to do on climate. It's ambitious, it's bold, but we're going to come together and do it. And then the council, I think, will be in a position to say, well, wait a second, the people want that, so let's move forward.
Thank you, Senator Biss. Lori?
So I have seen over time, and I actually want to correct something that I said in a previous forum. I had said that all of the sitting aldermen were endorsing Mr. Biss. And in fact, Cicely Fleming reached out to me and said, I am not. And I said, I apologize, I misspoke. And I think it says something to our community that of all the aldermen, that Cicely Fleming is running unopposed in her ward, And every other alderman, I don't think they're doing such a stellar job when 30 people have entered the race. And I think a big part of that problem is that the people's voice has been marginalized over time. And I know that because I've been the people's voice. I want to give a shout out to Sebastian. First of all, I think it's incredible. I know what it has taken to get this far in this race. And I think for a 20-year-old to be doing it is really admirable and impressive. So I just commend you for that. And I've seen you speak up at City Council, and many times we've both been on the same side of the issue, and we've been there speaking for the people. And I have been dismissed by council, in the same way that you mentioned as well. And I think that what we're going to need to do as a community is come together and let the representatives who we elect actually represent us, and have them have some accountability that they are responsible. It shouldn't take hundreds and hundreds of people coming to multiple meetings for the council to understand that this is not something that the public wants. And I think that we really need to listen to the people. And until we start to do that, we're going to have a lot of controversy. And so I would try to build consensus, and I would do that by having the council represent the people that have elected them.
Okay, thank you, Lori. Our next question is from Linda Del Bosque.
Hi, good evening, everyone. And thank you, Malika, for hosting this on Evanston Live TV. And congratulations for your Community Leadership Award.
Thank you.
Yes, and thank you to Lori, Sebastian, and Dan for attending this event with our community. Lori, you talk about speaking for the people, and I want to say thank you because I can relate to that. I have attended many council meetings, and it's very important that our next mayor attends the council meetings because they're in the grind with the people. They are facing many downfalls to the budget, and we're actually seeing the impact with the parking tickets. The parking tickets are over 200% currently right now from 2017, 2018. I myself received a boot because I wanted to test the system as I was at City Council, and I received a boot on City Council property, at the city property. With that in mind, will any of the mayors, Evanston mayor-to-elect, be open to reform the parking system and the parking ticket system instead of using it as a tool to bring money in and raising the cost every year? Will you be able to reform tickets, the ticket parking citation, and the whole entire department? So this is for Dan, this is for Lori and Sebastian. So who would like, Dan, could you ask that first?
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Linda, for that question. And it's interesting. I think we hear an immense amount of concern and frustration with parking in Evanston. You hear it from residents, who've undergone experiences like what you talked about. You hear it from business owners as well. And so I think we need to be open to any kind of fundamental overhaul to make the system less punitive, more user-friendly, and more consistent with the idea that we want actually to have people in our downtown and our other shopping areas as much as possible. Now, obviously, we've got to be careful about how to do it. First of all, because revenue is needed. And if we're going to significantly change things so that we decrease parking revenue in a meaningful way, we're going to have to find how to fill that hole. And we also need to be careful not to go too far in the wrong direction, because if parking is free, then all of a sudden you find that people have no place to park. So we got to be careful about how to do it. But I think, it's hard to go, a full day in Evanston without hearing from somebody about frustration with parking and kind of, comparisons with other suburbs and the feeling that we're just not quite doing it in a way that's friendly to residents. And so I think we need to be willing to take a comprehensive look at the right way to handle it that's not so frustrating and off-putting. Because again, the last thing we want to do is drive people away from shopping in Evanston.
Okay. Sebastian?
Yes, I think that there are two parts of this conversation, quite frankly, is that there's the business aspect of it, and especially in our downtown area, and having those conversations with business owners and residents and establishing what their wants and needs are. And if parking is one of their priorities, that, hey, parking is way too expensive in our downtown areas, is there any way that we could reform that? Then yes, let's go about making that reform. And I think Senator Biss touched on it well, is that obviously we don't want to completely make it free and we lose that revenue stream on top of having clustered parking in our downtown area and having a lack of accessibility to our downtown area. So that's having those conversations and figuring out exactly, working with city staff, the city manager, and making a comprehensive plan on how we address parking. But we also see it in terms of residential parking. We see that there are often wards that are ticketed more often than other wards. I talked to a resident who moved from the 6th ward over to the 9th ward, and they often had their car out during street cleaning or during snow removal, and they never received a ticket during their 8 years of living in Evanston. But as soon as they moved to the 9th ward, they saw an increase in parking tickets on their vehicle during days of street cleaning and snow removal. So we see that there's an inequity in the city on who gets ticketed when and where. And that's also a conversation that we need to have. Race is a thing that is a part of every single conversation when it comes to policy, and it needs to be acknowledged, whether it's climate change or parking tickets. So sitting down and looking at parking with an equity lens and saying, okay, this is a problem, quite frankly, and we need to make sure that we are equitably ticketing individuals in our city.
Thank you, Sebastian. Senator Biss?
I think I gave the previous answer. I think it's Lori's turn, right?
Lori, I'm sorry, Lori Keenan.
So I've actually FOIA'd, and I wish I had the numbers in front of me, but the numbers of parking tickets that Evanston residents receive in a year is truly insane. And we are supposed to be a progressive city, and parking tickets and our fees and our wheel tax, they're among the most regressive taxes, and those are punitive to our Black and brown communities. It affects the lowest income the most. I also am a small business owner in town, and I've helped businesses open in town. And when I hear that people are going to their businesses or not going to their businesses because they're getting parking tickets, I've seen on forums where people have said they would rather shop anywhere else but downtown Evanston, because not just the parking fees, but also the tickets. Importantly, I spoke up for the youth services division manager who was fired for his employees getting parking tickets in the Civic Center parking lot. Now, if that's not the most ridiculous thing you ever heard, I don't know what is. So I think that we need to take a bigger view of this problem and really fix it. I spoke on Monday night at City Council because one of the things that was going to be included in the budget for approval, staff recommended approving, was something called Smarking. And Smarking was a data company that was going to be looking at $50-some thousand a year, looking at the data for a parking garage in downtown Evanston. I would take that $150,000 that they were going to spend, and I would reduce or eliminate parking fees for the next year at least to invite people into our downtown. So some of those types of solutions, I think you need to be really paying attention in town, and you need to really care about how it disaffects not just our residents, but also our businesses and what that's doing to our downtown.
Okay, thank you, Lori. And we have a question from Allie Harnett.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to ask this question. This is along the lines of transparency and the people having a voice in Evanston. I hear all three candidates saying that they want change, they want more transparency, they want the people of Evanston to have more of a voice. So the Evanston Voter Initiative collected thousands of signatures in 2019 to put a ballot initiative in front of the voters that would have empowered Evanstonians to be able to propose legislation to the city council to take a roll call vote on, or for the electorate, if the city council didn't pass it, then for the electorate to vote on it in a referendum. Unfortunately, it was objected to by moneyed interests, and it was removed from the ballot, so the people never got a chance to vote on it. The current mayor was a part of an email chain with fellow mayors around the state to warn them of the possibility of this proposal coming to their town. So would you, as mayor, be in favor of the incoming city council putting a version of EVI proposal on the ballot for the people of Evanston to decide?
Sebastian Nalls, would you like to take that one first?
I think that's an excellent question, and quite frankly, I think it's a needed thing that we have or need in Evanston. It's individuals here, obviously, and residents here have stated that they feel that they don't have a voice. And after going through the process of becoming a candidate myself, I know how difficult it can be to go out and get signatures. And it's no different when coming to or getting signatures for a referendum. And the amount of work that's needed to achieve that signature count is extreme, and especially during times such as these. So I think that it's extremely important that we have something like that involved, because if residents feel as if that city council is not taking the necessary steps to fix a certain issue, then they themselves can take initiative and get the necessary signatures and put forth policy to at least have that conversation. Because we've seen before that if you just go to public comment, that you can get ignored by city staff and by elected officials. So this would be a way to at least spur the conversation and force a vote on the issue. And then you can truly see how your elected officials feel about a certain subject. And for me, it's more power to the people, quite frankly. It's a democracy. And if we are enabling more individuals to come out and be a part of that democratic process, I'm all for it.
Thank you. Thank you. Senator Biss?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the question, Allie, and thanks for all the immense amount of work you put into that and other projects in this town. Yeah, I think that having more direct public voice in our government is valuable and important. I do think we're living in a moment right now where a lot of people feel like they're not being heard. And there's not a easier, more straightforward, honest way of enabling people to be heard than to have the referendum process play a bigger role in city government. I think we need to design it properly. I think the EVI had a lot of really good ingredients in it. I think the idea especially that is both important, and if I could be a little harsh in my language, it's kind of offensive when elected officials don't accept this, is the idea that if the residents want something, they sign the petition and they vote for it at the ballot box, then at least put it before the council for an up or down vote, right? Because I get it, you can't always govern completely by referendum. And if you look at a place like California or even Colorado in some cases with their so-called taxpayer Bill of Rights, there's things that can really go wrong if you just govern willy-nilly by referendum. But if you say, hey, the public goes out, gets the signatures, pounds the pavement, puts the thing on the ballot, then the residents say they want it, at least force the council to vote up or down. And if the council disagrees with the public, force them to defend that disagreement at the next election. So I think that's a really constructive balance to strike and a way to make sure that we're giving the people the tools they need to directly impact their government. There's a saying, and I think one of the other candidates even mentioned it tonight, that some people in government, when criticized, sometimes say, well, if you don't like it, run against me. That's not realistic for everybody. It's awesome when folks step up to run and make a difference in their community. It's also not possible for everybody, depending on their family situation, their financial situation, their physical health situation. And so to create this other venue for public voice, I think it's valuable, and I think it would heal some of the distrust in our town.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an issue. Lori Keenan?
Well, Allie, thanks for the question. And I know the work that you've done on the Evanston Voter Initiative, because the referendum before that, you and I worked on together. So I know what work this can be. I was at the original meeting when Devon Reed, the city clerk, brought former Governor Quinn in to discuss what EVI, the Evanston, or the voter initiative could be, was really encouraging to me, because as a community member over the years, I have seen that where there is a groundswell of really grassroots support in the community is typically where the public interest lies. And so I think oftentimes that we need to be listening to the voices of the people. And I don't think that that should always have to be a referendum. However, if there is public support, then I think the voter initiative is a great opportunity to help enact legislation that represents our community at large. I've been involved and I know the work that goes into it. So I would encourage that, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you for that question, Allie. Thank you. Thank you. And I know the work that you did with EVI, still doing with EVI. Actually, I have a follow-up question before we go on to the next question. The council really fought against EVI. What are your thoughts on why did they fight against them so hard, fight against EVI so hard? You would like to take that one?
Well, let me, I used pretty strong language about this in my answer. So let me, in the spirit of turning the other cheek, let me try to take a crack at this.
Okay.
I think if you look at a place like California, you've seen that California has been really hurt by too many referenda. In California, it's pretty easy to get a binding referendum on the ballot. And then what you find is you put one little referendum on the ballot by itself, and if it sounds good, people vote for it. Well, imagine if you did your grocery shopping, not by asking yourself what your budget was and having a comprehensive thought process about your needs, then figuring out what you're going to buy, but instead, one at a time, item by item saying, do I want it or not? Well, you might say yes to this and 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 yes to this. And when you're done saying yes to everything, you might be way over budget. And it has been difficult. It's been really hard for them to balance their budgets in California. It's been hard for them to raise new revenue. It's just been rough. And so I think the point of view that says you can overdo it is correct. And I think the fear that some people have of how dangerous it is for a government to overdo the referendum approach is fair. But again, as I said, if what the initiative says is, hey, if we get this thing on the ballot and we vote for it as the people of Evanston, then if the city council wants to turn it down, they've got to actually take a vote and go on the record opposing the will of the people. I think that strikes the balance well, because on the one hand, it forces them to take up the question. But on the other hand, if for some reason the outcome of the referendum process truly was dangerous for the community, it still has that check and balance on the back end. But that would be kind of the generous interpretation of what the skepticism is about. And for the ungenerous interpretation, I don't know, we'll have to all keep our guesses to ourselves.
Okay, that was an interesting perspective. I didn't think of it that way. Sebastian?
I certainly won't be so generous when talking about our city council and the actions that they've taken, because we've seen, especially when it came to the city manager hiring, that they performed their vote in executive session. And it was two aldermen, I believe it was Tom Suffredin and Cecile Fleming, that said that they wanted that vote to be public, that the public should know exactly how their elected representative voted on a key issue such as that. So we've seen before that the current city council will often not want to be responsible for their actions. And this EVI would essentially hold these elected officials accountable, that it forces them to vote on an issue. And if it's an issue that they feel that voters aren't necessarily informed to the fullest degree on, then vote on it accordingly. And it's just, we see that the city council has not been transparent and has not been responsible for some of their actions. So that is why I believe that they have opposed something such as EVI. And quite frankly, it's a shame, because as I've said probably 3 or 4 times now, that we are public servants and we are here to serve the people of Evanston. And if we are not doing that, we are not doing our jobs, and we do not deserve to be in office. And it'll be interesting to see how residents vote which way or the other come February and in April. and if they feel the same sentiment.
Okay. And Lori?
And I would not be even as generous as Sebastian was. I think that it's beyond even a lack of transparency. I think that they're giving the illusion of transparency, which is somehow worse, where decisions are being made before meetings are had. And we are given this idea that we are a part of the process, when in fact, that decision has been made weeks before, 100 emails earlier, and in a very not public process. And I think the minimum is to let us know how our elected officials voted, especially within our wards. Are they representing the voices of the people who have elected them? So I think that the reason that these types of initiatives would be opposed by the sitting council anyway, is that it's a loss of power. It's really giving power back to the people, which is why I feel like something like this is so important.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Miracle Jenkins has a question. She's been waiting patiently.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. So I'm essentially wondering, what are you going to do, all of you, to address racial inequities or inequalities here in Evanston? For example, when I went to the high school, I took a couple of AP courses, and I was probably one of 3 non-white people in all of my AP courses. And then after that, most folks that were not white that I know didn't go to college. And if you take a look at Black home ownership in Evanston, that also is pretty far down. So I'm wondering, specifically, for the youth, what's your vision for them? But in general, what are you going to do to make Black folks, just non-white people in general, feel safe, especially given the display of white supremacy we've seen here on January 6th? What are concrete things you're going to do? And again, specifically for the youth.
Senator Biss, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you, Miracle, for the question, which I think is the central question in Evanston, honestly. I think it has been for many decades, and I think it especially is today. I think there's a lot of different areas we've got to work on at the same time. We've got to work inside the city government. We have to work through our housing system. We have to work to enact and implement and expand the reparations program. We have to work on environmental justice. We certainly have to work on our mechanisms of public safety. And on our infrastructure. And so I talked a little bit earlier on about the way we have to make sure as a city internally, we've come to an agreement with the whole community about the definition of equity. We have clear metrics, and we're transparent about how much progress we're making toward those metrics in terms of hiring and contracting and promotion and dismissal and evaluation of policy and so forth. And there's someone on staff in the city who's at least half of their job is devoted to overseeing the implementation of our equity vision. So that's the internal stuff. I think housing is a really, really critical aspect of this, because quite frankly, residential segregation has given rise to school segregation, which has a lot to do, in my opinion, with the achievement gap. And so we need to, first of all, utilize the reparations program, which is already a tool to help overcome housing segregation. But we also need to use the zoning code and to our partnerships with nonprofits and other governments to bring in subsidies to enable people to afford homes in all parts of this community. I think that we need to talk about environmental justice, about the disparate impacts between the quality of air and water available to Black and brown people versus white people in this community, and the inequities, for example, in testing for lead between the different wards. And so I'm sorry, this answer has come off as kind of a long laundry list. I'm down to 8 seconds left. But the point is, every single thing we do in this town can either exacerbate white supremacy, or it can be an anti-racist act that improves the situation. And we need to ask ourselves before we do anything, are we making things worse, or are we acting as anti-racist and making things better? And if it's not in that second column, we need to stop and do something different instead.
Thank you, Senator Biss. Sebastian Nalls.
I would say that I'm the perfect one to answer this question, just because I am a product of the system that you just mentioned, Miracle. That I took AP class as well in high school, and I was, one of the only Black students in those classes. And quite frankly, we have a lot of work to do, especially in the city level. of providing resources for Black and Brown youth here in Evanston. And we can touch on police reform. We can touch on environmental justice, some of the problems that stem from tape coat and the waste transfer station. And we can talk about public safety, but quite frankly, what we can do as a city is we can provide more opportunities for our youth through the Community Development Department, as well as the Parks and Recreation Department. And take an initiative of hiring more youth, and especially more youth of color, and bringing them programs that help them succeed in the classroom and outside of the classroom. I saw that a lot of my peers throughout my time at the high school were not prepared for the second stage of life. And it takes a village to raise a child. So it's important that we come together as a community and recognize that we have issues that we face, and especially when it comes to race, and having those conversations and actually implementing policy to fix those problems. And that includes providing programs, especially for youth of color. And whether that's intramural sports, science fairs that are held by the city on a consistent basis, a youth job program that's, be in mind, already existing, but expanding that. And especially what the mayor can do as well as being an advocate for all of these programs, but implementing some of those internship opportunities that I talked about earlier, and including more youth in our local government. And so they can take the skills that they learn on the job and take them throughout life in whichever way that they decide to go.
Thank you so much, Sebastian. We have a question from Vanessa Calloway, our Delta Sigma Theta.
Malika, I think you missed Lori really quick.
Yes, you missed
Lori. I apologize, Lori. I apologize, Lori.
Right.
That's okay.
Lori?
Sebastian's answer was so impressive. I don't think I could add to it. I'm continually impressed by him. So, but anyway, I have really, in the ways that I've seen my involvement in the community, I think that people need to be personally involved, whether you're a T-ball coach or a Girl Scout leader, as I have been, to make sure that every child who wants to participate can, but also through programs like the gentleman I spoke with today, to make sure that we're not just focused on telling kids that they should be going to college, that we can be providing job training and we can be providing opportunities really for everyone. It was part of what I found with this DJ Coleman Foundation, providing scholarships for youth, freshmen really, so they could sort of keep their eye on the prize about what they wanted to do with their futures. I think, and I've said it before, you know, what happens with our kids in town is that's the formative experience. And so we really need to be encouraging the best possible outcomes for all kids and across, really, not just in your ward and not just at your elementary school, but for all of the kids in town. And I think that really amplifying the program like the one I spoke to this gentleman today, and letting the community know that this exists so that they know that their kids can get involved in it. I spoke with a woman in line as I was getting petition signatures, and her daughter is a ETHS basketball player. And she said, there just isn't enough for the youth to do in town. And I think that that's a big problem. And I think that kids who are bored end up getting in trouble. If they're busy, they're productive, they're looking at, you know, maybe they have a mentorship or a mentor. I think that those are the ways to encourage kids to really sort of choose a better path. And I think that the more opportunities we can provide, the more important that is.
Thank you very much, Lori. Thank you. Okay, Vanessa.
All right, we've heard so much from all three of you regarding youth and especially education in a variety of areas. So what are your thoughts regarding appointing a youth commission? And would middle and high school students be involved in this commission? If you want to hear their voices, high school representation, and maybe like 7th or 8th graders who we can train to become the next involved citizens. What are your thoughts on appointing a youth commission?
Okay, Sebastian Nalls, would you like to take that one?
Certainly, I would be all for something like that. I've said throughout the night, I sound like a broken record at this point, that we need to get youth involved in local politics. And I think that this is exactly what should be done. And we sometimes forget that youth, especially that are under the age of 18, are still functioning individuals and still contribute to the city of Evanston, whether that's going out and buying things or just providing, resources for the city of Evanston. A number of my employees that worked under me during my time working for the Parks and Recreation Department were under the age of 18. And they were fantastic individuals that performed their duties to the highest of degrees. And so I think it's imperative that we include them on conversations that span a number of topics. And again, they have ideas that I myself or anyone may not have thought of before. And having those new fresh ideas being inserted into the conversation will spur change in Evanston. And it will also keep youth involved as well and keep them up to date on what's going on in Evanston. This is their home as much as it is any one of ours. So it's important that they have a voice whenever we have a discussion about race, the environment, or any number of things.
Thank you, Sebastian. Senator Biss?
Yeah, thanks so much for the question. The answer, of course, is yes. I think it's a great idea. And let me just say a few things about it. First of all, I just want to be really direct about this. I think youth engagement sometimes comes off pretty condescending. I think it can be sort of a, well, we want to encourage these future leaders, so we'll create some activity for them, but also we know they can't really teach us anything because we're the experts and they're the kids, and so we'll just sort of go through the motions. Hopefully they'll enjoy it and be inspired, and then we'll go back to the rest of our lives the next day. I think a lot of municipal engagement at ETHS has kind of been like that. We'll show up for a day, we'll do an event, we'll leave again, and then you'll see us next year. I think that misreads the situation pretty badly. I remember when I was in the legislature, I had a youth advisory committee that included a number of members from all the different high schools in my district. And we had these phenomenal meetings where I learned a lot every single time and wound up with legislative ideas that really affected the way I did my job. I remember a few years ago meeting with Molly Hartenstein and Phoebe Liccardo at the Starbucks on Dempster. They were at the time high school students who have since gone on to be co-founders of the Evanston Fight for Black Lives. And they made me aware of some ideas and some efforts that we could make at the state of Illinois around gun safety that I never would have thought of. And I brought them to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General has been running with those ideas and making real progress. And so I think there's tremendous value for the youth if we create that kind of body to be a venue where young people can be engaged and energized and inspired. But I just want to make sure we're remembering that it's not just for the youth, it's for the rest of us too. And we need to remember that someone's chronological age is not a destiny in terms of whether they have something to teach us. In fact, in my experience, a lot of people in this youngest generation have a lot to teach us right now, and we ought to be listening.
Laura Keenan, thank you for that. Senator Biss, thank you.
So I was going to say a very similar answer. In my business, I often have interns, and I have always said they teach me more than I teach them. I think the energy and the enthusiasm and the ideas and just sort of overall, they're really bringing so much to the party. And Evanston Fight for Black Lives is a great example. Those young women spoke at council. That there's such an impressive group of women. They have put forward a proposal that the city council all but dismissed. I think that we need to be listening to our youth, and we need to be including them. So an Evanston Youth Commission, I think, is a great idea. I think the more we can include our youth, the more buy-in they have in our community and the better ideas we have. I think one great place that we should absolutely be including our youth is in this Climate Action Resilience Plan. It is their world that they're going to inherit. And I think that they have a really vested interest in suggesting ideas and being involved in that process. So I would absolutely encourage a youth program in the city.
Okay, thank you, Lori. Okay, we have time for one more We're coming up on the end here. Willie Shaw, NAACP.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to share a question from the chat, and that question is from Chris. He says, right now, there are different levels of after-school care. Some is offered by District 65, some is offered by the Park District, and some is offered by Right at School. Would you be open for pushing for one level of childcare with equitable enrichment for all students at something maybe like a sliding scale rate, I believe? Daniel?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a good idea. Obviously, it would require a successful partnership and conversation with District 65, but that's actually kind of, I think, what's so important about this idea and how much it has to teach us about what we could be doing better as a city. We have two school districts and the city government here on the same geographic plot of land for the most part. And I think those different bodies could coordinate more effectively, could collaborate more effectively, and could solve problems together more effectively. So the childcare and the after school program example, I think, is a really great example where there's terrific opportunity. Here's another example. We are now in the, it's January, so we're well into our remote learning experience. And that has shown a light on the importance of access to technology and access to high-speed, reliable internet service, without which it's now impossible for our children to participate in school. So just imagine if we had a tighter collaboration between District 65 and 202 and the city of Evanston, possibly partnering with Northwestern to provide a universal citywide Wi-Fi option. That's something that I don't think any one of those organizations could do on their own, but if we came together and partnered, I think there would be an opportunity to get something like that done. And it's just an example of a place where, hey, maybe one government body's needs and another government body's resources and another government body's technical expertise could come together and enable us to solve a problem collectively. So I think that the example you gave is good. I think there are other examples of ways where we could achieve more efficiency and better service and more equitable service delivery by combining better and meshing our efforts. And I'm committed to make sure we do our best to accomplish that.
Sebastian?
So when I worked for the Parks and Recreation Department, we did have a number of after-school programs and programs similar to such. And I recognized firsthand the necessity to having before care programs and after care programs for parents who work that 8 to say 9 job, and they can't come get their kid in the afternoon right after when school ends. So it's important that we provide these services. And obviously, as what Senator Biss touched on, is that this would require collaboration between District 65, District 202, the Park District, the Parks and Recreation Department, and coming together and logistically analyzing what staffing would need to look like for having a program of this magnitude, who exactly would be in charge of such a program, if that would be the city of Evanston, the Park District, the school districts, and just sitting down and having those meaningful conversations. And I will be completely honest, I have never heard anybody suggest such a thing. And I think it would be an interesting thing to think about. And that's why there's so much value to sitting down with residents and having these conversations. And because if a politician tells you that they have the answer to everything, then they're lying to you. There are so many of you Evanston residents that have so many wonderful ideas that you can bring to the table. Each one of you is an expert in your own field. There's some of you that have done extensive research on climate change, some on affordable housing, some on childcare. So using all of your skills as a resource to come together and make this community better is something that is much needed. So I welcome ideas such as that one, and creating new programs that can, quite frankly, make the lives of Evanstonians easier and take a burden off of their chest.
Laurie?
Well, I keep going back to Sebastian's got the answer, but truly, I think that listening to the residents, and I have often said that the people I volunteered with in town could run a small nation. They truly have the skills and the talent and the ideas and the ability and the willingness. So I think that something like an after school or some sort of program that really provided an opportunity, an equal opportunity to all of our kids would be a great idea. And how do we get there? I think we go to the community and we start to talk to the people who are the experts that can lend their ideas and their expertise and their resources, frankly, and their connections. So that's where I would start. I think it's a great concept, and I think it would be really excellent to try to implement something like that.
Well, these have been great questions. We actually had some comments on the youth program, and the last question, Alderman Holmes had said, you know, we had a youth commission in the past. Her daughter, Kimberly Ross Holmes, said that we do have childcare. We do have youth programs that get kids involved. So I guess that raises the question, we have these programs, so why aren't we really hearing their voices? You know, because I know the youth, this new generation, they definitely have something to say. So I would love to hear how you all intend to make sure that they are heard. There's so many programs that we don't know about. So for the homes to let us know, we do have those programs. They're in existence right now. They've been in existence. So what's the problem there? How come we don't know?
If I can answer, Malika.
Okay.
So I think that part of the problem in Evanston is that we're not communicating in a really good way. I think that you know, I'm in public relations and marketing, and sometimes I'll hear about something. For instance, this program today, I happen to have spoken to this gentleman before, but every single family in Evanston should know about this program, and we don't. And I think it's a shame, you know, when I watch or am sitting at these city council meetings, I think that every alderman in call of the wards, I cannot get over it when they have nothing to say. And I think that we need to start really sharing information better and sort of pooling our resources so that everyone knows what's out there and what's available, so that we're all able to take, you know, to take advantage of the opportunities that are there. I think that starts with communication and collaboration.
Okay, thank you, Lori. And Sebastian, want to take 60 seconds because we're running out of time, but I would love to hear everyone's answer on that.
I think Lori touched on that perfectly with communicating the sort of programs that we offer here at the city, and just doing a better job of communicating with residents is definitely a problem there. And we have those programs in place. We need to expand them and actually look towards them. We saw an issue throughout the past 4 years that committees in general here in Evanston have not been taken seriously. And we've seen a mass exodus of committee members who are qualified in their field that they have not been listened to by city council. So holding city council accountable and making sure that they are listening to those committees is definitely important. And especially when it comes to whatever youth committee is created and implemented, is that we actually listen to what they have to say and give them a voice, and we listen to it. And if there's a change that needs to be made, that we listen to their opinions and we implement said change.
Thank you, Sebastian. And Senator Biss?
Yeah, I think the previous question really explained a lot of this challenge. We have a lot of different things happening in Evanston, and there's not always the level of coordination between them that makes it easy for most of us to find out about them. So I used to tell people that when I was in the House, Evanston was well under 10% of my district, right? 90 or I think 93 or 94% of my constituents lived somewhere else. And yet a third of the calls to my office came from Evanston, because Evanstonians are so engaged and so committed and have so many ideas and so much energy. And there's so many organizations in this town. There's so many programs in this town. Well, it can become too much to keep track of unless we have a mayor and a city government that does two things. Number one, communicates about everything. But number two, more importantly, frankly, gets everyone working together so that people can sit at a table, share ideas, and combine their efforts. Because once we're actually working together effectively and united, then we're just going to be unstoppable.
Thank you very much, Senator Biss. Well, we're coming to a close here. I want to thank everyone for your time tonight. I feel like we got to know the candidates more. We will be having a mayoral debate where they will debate one another February 2nd. Looking forward to that event. So you all stay tuned, Evanston Live TV. But thank you so much to the candidates, to Senator Biss, thank you. Sebastian Nalls, thank you. Lori Keenan, thank you. And
Thank you, Malika.
I know that this has been an intense time period with everything that's going on in the country right now. It's like what a time to be running a campaign. So we respect your work and your platform. All of you have great platforms. So looking forward to hearing more from you. And a special thank you to my partners here tonight, Willie Shaw, NAACP. Thank you so much, Willie, for us coming together.
Yes.
Thank you, thank you. And to the Delta Sigma Theta, where's she at? She's still with us. There she is, Vanessa Calloway. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you. And to the AKAs, President Stella Hickman and Claire McFarland. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to participate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
This has been very, very informative, so I want to thank you all as well. And the NAACP wishes all of the candidates well. And a special thanks to my Civic Engagement Committee and my partners in this. So look forward to working with you again.
All right. Thank you so much. And to Janan Smith, who's keeping us on track here tonight. Thank you. Thank you. I don't know how people run these things, by themselves. There's no way. There is absolutely no way. So thank you so much, Janan. Thank you. And to the residents of Evanston, we love you. Thank you so much for being engaged and caring and showing up and asking some really great questions. Some things definitely were put on my mind thinking about. And thank you all. And please stay tuned for more forums that are coming up. We have the primary February 23rd. So you all please stay updated with everything that's going on in Evanston with the primary. Evanston Live TV, we have our District 65 forum coming up. We have the 5th Ward forum coming up on the 21st. District 65 is on the 20th. And then we have the mayoral debate, February 2nd. So stay tuned and please engage all the other forums that are out there. I know our candidates are going to be drained, exhausted by April because they got to attend all of these because we can't see each other in person anymore. So they got to hop on all these forums. But please get involved and learn more and more about these candidates. And to the candidates, I would like for each of you all to take just a second to let everyone know where to contact you so that you can answer more questions off camera. Senator Biss?
My website is danielbiss.com and my email address is daniel@danielbiss.com. I'll put that in the chat right now. We had awesome questions. Thank you so much to the hosting organizations, to Malika, Evanston Live TV, Alpha Kappa Alpha, NAACP, sorry, Delta Sigma Theta. What am I doing here? But thanks to everyone who had their questions. They were great questions. It was a great discussion, but I'm sure a lot of folks didn't get their questions answered. So shoot me an email. Really excited to continue the discussion.
Yes, yes. And Laura Keenan?
You can reach me at Keenan, the number 4, evanston.org is the website. You can fill out a form there to send an email, or you can send an email to info@keenanforevanston.org. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I really encourage you, if you didn't get your answer or your question answered tonight, please reach out to us. Thank you, Malika, for all that you do for the community and for this tonight. Thank you, Alpha Kappa Alpha, and Delta Sigma Theta, and the NAACP for hosting tonight. I was glad we were able to figure out a time and date that worked for all the organizations to come together. So thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, thank you. And Sebastian Nalls. Sebastian, you're muted.
Yep, sorry. But to find more info on me, you can visit www.sebastiannalls.com. My email as well is nallscampaign2021@gmail.com. I love having these conversations with residents. I've already had a number of residents reach out, call me on the phone even, and I enjoy talking with you all about whatever, even if you just want to chat. So just give me a call, give me an email, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you to everyone for putting this event together. And I appreciated being here and having a chance to talk with everyone. And I hope that everyone is staying safe and have a good rest of their weekend.
All right. Thank you all so much. Thank you all. Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, this has been Malika of Evanston Live TV. That was our mayoral forum, partnered with NAACP, Delta Sigma Theta, Alpha Kappa Alpha. You all stay tuned for more here at Evanston Live TV. And remember, stay engaged so that you know what's going on. Do not get caught like, oh, I didn't know what was happening. I hear that so much with Evanston. I hear that so much. There's no excuse. With all this technology, there is no excuse. Stay engaged.